Merry greetings, everyone, and welcome to an overview of one of my all-time favorite Disney series, Gargoyles, where we will briefly explore its theme, conception, creation, and symbolism. A real breakthrough for Walt Disney Animation. The series was originally created by Greg Weisman and premiered in October 1994. Lasting for about 65 episodes over 2 seasons, to be followed by a 13-episode non-canonical 3rd season in 1996, for about a total of 78 episodes, which was more or less the typical number of episodes of most cartoons of the time. But Gargoyles proved to be among one of the most unique shows and gained a popular cult following that has only grown since then. It was first originally pitched as a comedy adventure series to be part of the Disney afternoon lineup of popular cartoons, which included DuckTales, Gummy Bears, Tailspin, Chip and Dale Rescue Rangers, Goof Troop, and more during the 90s, many of which were part of my childhood. Hey, don't let my age fool you, I'm still a kid at heart. One of its first inspirations as a comedy adventure was Disney's Adventures of the Gummy Bears, an animated series that took place in the European Middle Ages and had a rich mythology, which Greg Weisman also worked on as director of series development. Despite many revisions and rewriting, Gargoyles didn't really seem to work as a comedy adventure, so it finally became a fantasy drama with darker, more mature tones. This would prove to be a new direction for Disney, as it greatly differed from the rest of its cartoon canon, making it a kind of dark horse or black sheep among them, which they hoped would give it the potential to also rival other popular action cartoons of the time, such as Batman, Spider-Man, X-Men, and Power Rangers, most of which I also watched at the time and still enjoy to this day, except for Power Rangers. On a side note, Marvel Comics published a short-lived comic series based on the animated series of Gargoyles in 1995, which isn't considered canon, and I haven't been able to read yet. Happy coincidence or weird foreshadowing? I'll let you decide. What also set Gargoyles apart from the more light-hearted cartoons and other action-adventure series of the time was not only its darker, more mature themes and touching on issues still relevant today, but also its transition from a high fantasy medieval setting to a more modern contemporary urban fantasy setting in 1994 Manhattan, as well as its Arthurian and Shakespearean themes, which I was way into even before Gargoyles, its Celtic mythology and folklore, and even real myths and legends from around the world, and even occasional weird sci-fi and horror themes. So it had a little bit of everything. On another side note, during its rather long 2nd season, it did literal world building with a rather long story arc called the Avalon World Tour. And for this reason is why I personally split the 2nd season into 2 seasons, as that's what it felt like. And it was usually common for a season of a series to be 26 episodes long, and Gargoyles' 2nd season was twice that long. Still, to travel the world and give different kinds of mythology and folklore brief moments in the spotlight showed the enormous potential for storytelling from the series, and just made it feel all the more real and deep. What also made it feel even more real were its overarching themes of diversity, tolerance, dealing with fear and prejudice, love, and the importance of friendship and family, all of which were driven by complexly flawed but well-developed character and conflict-driven plots, and the deep, important lessons that were common in most cartoons of the day, as well as still today. But done with such passion and love, to feel so organic and naturally intelligent without being preachy, which I think is still important for storytelling today. It showed the good, the bad, and everything in between about the choices and conflicts everyone faces in real life. As the series progressed and the characters faced various conflicts, not only did they grow as people, they also grew as a group. In the first season, it was the story about how the main clan of 6 gargoyles went from being the Wyvern clan in 10th century Scotland to becoming the Manhattan clan in 20th century New York City, more than doubling in number in the canon slave labor graphic comics. However, before the slave labor graphic comics came out around 2006 or 2007, the quote-unquote continuation of the series was done in other ways by fans of the show. The series ended in 1997 after its rather infamous third season, called the Goliath Chronicles, which I may do a review of at a later time, and it has been blamed for the series cancellation, but I understand it was a lot more complex than that. So, the Goliath Chronicles have been labeled as apocryphal material, or non-canon, while the SLG comics are to be considered canon, as they were done under the supervision of the original creator Greg Weisman. But long before the SLG comics came out, the show had developed such a passionate, if obscure, fan base that after its cancellation, a group of fans got together and created their own version of the series' continuation, much of which was inspired by quote-unquote canon and canon in training ideas revealed by Greg Weisman as his master plan for the show, if it had been able to last longer. And while he had no involvement with this fan-made project, it was a well-made endeavor called the Gargoyles saga. And it even included versions of hinted at but never made spin-offs such as Time Dancer, The Adventures of a Time-Traveling Brooklyn, Pendragon, The Continuing Adventures of King Arthur and Sir Griff, and Dark Ages, a kind of prequel series with the original cast at younger ages and having adventures at Castle Wyvern while still in Scotland in the 10th century. But even before that, like all franchises, even before the series ended prematurely, there were fans who continued and or interpreted their love of the show with fan fiction, myself included, even into my adult age. There have even been fan writers who continued the series with their own sagas of sorts, picking up from where Season 2, or even on occasion, rare occasion, where Season 3 ended. In a nutshell, fan fiction and fan art are works done by fans of established franchises using licensed characters and settings of said franchise in any form of media. TV shows, movies, books, video games, etc., what have you. I've learned it's not only a great way to practice writing and art skills, but even a way to explore the untold stories in one's favorite franchises, like side stories, individual characters and their psychology, what-ifs, or even what happens next after a story has supposedly ended, which is the kind of fanfiction I do for Gargoyles and TGS. Fanfiction even has its own weird subgenres I hope to discuss soon. But the real question is, where did the original concept of the show come from? According to Greg Weisman, he always had a fascination with the fantastical statues and wondered what they might have been like as real living beings. So, he worked on his concept for the show in the early 90s, and the rabbit hole just seems to get deeper from there. Their symbolism goes back centuries, and may require a bit of a longer discussion, but a brief history is, they may have first appeared as protectors, or guardians of churches and or cathedrals in the 11th or 12th centuries, and may have been inspired by memories or stories of nature spirits and or pagan deities from pre-Christian times. While their name may have been inspired by the French word, and please forgive my pronunciation, gargoyle, meaning gargle, which refers to the sound made in the back of the throat or gullet as water flowed out of the throats of monstrous-shaped waterspouts. When they first became more commonly called gargoyles isn't quite known, but they had also been called grotesques and or chimeras, after the creature from Greek mythology, due to the various blend of human and animal features. One story goes that the word gargoyle came from the monstrous dragon, Gargoyle, that lived in the river Seine and ravaged the town of Rouen in the 7th century, until the Archbishop Romanus slayed him and saved the town. After attempting to burn the dragon's body, all that were left were its head and neck, having been toughened and immune to fire due to its own fiery breath. So, the head and neck were mounted upon the town's church from then on to frighten away evil forces. And this may be the origin of the previous mentioned French word, gargoyle, as well as the modern concept of the gargoyle statues themselves. And to me, this may suggest that gargoyles and dragons may even be related in some way, which may have been hinted at in the show when characters gasp, "by the dragon" expression every now and then, or even in the name of Castle Wyvern, as a wyvern is said to be a type of dragon with just 2 legs and unable to breathe fire. If there is a deeper connection, I'll need to do more research. But 1 or 2 connections I do know that they have, dragons and gargoyles, are their places in pop culture. Not just the animated series, but their deep influence and uses throughout the fantasy genre. They have been represented as both good and evil, depending on the story or source material. And there hasn't been a lack of either character alignment in the animated series, though a majority of gargoyle characters have been presented as good, or in more gray areas. Many of these elements just made the show ahead of its time and still relevant today. Perhaps even in some ways have unintentionally and indirectly influenced themes and concepts of many animated shows today, with more rounded characters and facing realistic worldly problems in more organic and very relatable ways. It's not just black and white anymore, there's definitely gray areas. Unfortunately, despite such a well-done show and positive receptions from a strong, if moderately sized fan base, it got cancelled after its 3rd season, as the tone seemed to shift from a sense of maturity to a bit more of a common Saturday morning action cartoon feel. Despite this, it still has a cult following, including myself, in more recent years, and has steadily gained something of a comeback thanks to streaming on Disney+. There have even been calls and or requests to bring back the series in some form or another. But until then, if, and that's a very big if, and when that does happen, I hope to share my love of the show with you and discuss more. Even expand on things I've discussed here and even talk about my fan fictions continuing the story. Please comment to continue the fun discussion, like, and subscribe. You can find me on Instagram, Facebook, DeviantArt, my stories on fanfiction.net, or you can even support me on Patreon to help me get more off of the ground. Until next time, thank you for watching and stay inspired.